In 28 years of priesthood, I have faced many challenges: financial crises that threatened to close our parish, scandals that tested our community's faith, liturgical disputes that divided parishioners, and the slow erosion of religious practice among Italian youth. I have witnessed conversions and apostasies, miracles and tragedies, moments of profound grace, and periods of spiritual darkness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, in nearly 3 decades of pastoral ministry prepared me for what happened on the night of October 12, 2024, exactly 18 years after the death of Carlo Acutis, when 12 young anti-clerical activists violently invaded our church during a prayer vigil dedicated to the young blessed, intending to destroy his image and disrupt our worship. My name is Father Alessandro Costa. I am 52 years old, and for 28 years I have served as parish priest of the Church of San Francesco in Bari, a coastal city in southern Italy. I am not a mystical person by nature. I'm a practical administrator, a pragmatic pastor, someone who focuses on budgets, maintenance schedules, catechesis programs, and the ordinary work of keeping a parish functioning. I believe in miracles because the Church teaches they occur, but I had never personally witnessed anything that couldn't be explained through natural causes, psychological factors, or the ordinary workings of grace through sacraments and prayer. Until the night of October 12, 2024, when I watched, along with approximately 60 terrified parishioners, as a golden light exploded from a simple framed photograph of Carlo Acutis with such intensity that it illuminated our entire church like midday sun. When I witnessed 12 violent young men freeze instantly into human statues, completely paralyzed but fully conscious, their eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down their immobile faces. When I heard these same young men, who had entered our church shouting blasphemies and carrying equipment to amplify satanic music, fall to their knees 5 minutes later, sobbing with repentance, describing identical mystical encounters with Carlo Acutis, who had spoken to each of them during their paralysis. The entire phenomenon was captured on dozens of cell phone videos from multiple angles, creating documentation so clear and irrefutable that the Vatican's Congregation for the Causes of Saints launched an immediate investigation. Medical experts have examined the paralysis phenomenon. Psychologists have interviewed the converted young men. Technology specialists have analyzed the simultaneous failure of all electronic equipment the invaders carried. No natural explanation has been found for what occurred on that October night in Bari. What I witnessed was not subtle spiritual consolation or private mystical experience that could be attributed to religious imagination. What I witnessed was public, dramatic, physically impossible intervention that transformed 12 aggressive atheists into weeping converts in the space of 5 minutes. An intervention so undeniable that even the most skeptical observers cannot dismiss it as coincidence or psychological suggestion. This is the story of how a violent invasion intended to mock and destroy became the most powerful evangelistic moment of my priesthood, and how Carlo Acutis, a teenager who died at 15 wearing his beloved Nike sneakers, demonstrated from heaven that his intercessory power extends even to the hardest, most hostile hearts imaginable. To understand the context of what happened on October 12th, 2024, you need to understand the spiritual and cultural climate in Bari during the months leading up to that extraordinary night. Because the invasion wasn't a random act of vandalism, but the culmination of escalating hostility toward the church in general and toward Carlo Acutis' cult in particular. I was born in 1972 in Bari to a working-class family. My father was a fisherman. My mother worked in a local cafe. We were traditionally Catholic. Mass on Sundays, rosary in the home, devotion to our local saints, but not particularly intense in our practice. I entered seminary at age 20, was ordained at 26 in 1998, and was assigned to the Church of San Francesco as parish priest in 1996. The Church of San Francesco is located in Bari's Old Town, a historic neighborhood with narrow cobblestone streets, Baroque architecture, and a population that has lived there for generations. Our parish serves approximately 1,200 registered families, though active Mass attendance has declined over the years. Like most Italian parishes, we're struggling with secularization, aging congregations, and young people drifting away from religious practice. My priesthood has been characterized by steady, patient, unglamorous work, maintaining the parish buildings, organizing catechesis for children, visiting the sick, celebrating sacraments, mediating family disputes, managing finances. I'm not a brilliant preacher or a charismatic leader. I'm simply a faithful priest trying to serve my people with competence and love. In 2020, when Carlo Acutis was beatified, just 14 years after his death at age 15 on October 12, 2006, from fulminant leukemia, I was intrigued but not particularly moved. I had read about Carlo, born May 3, 1991, in London, moved to Milan as an infant, displayed extraordinary Eucharistic devotion from childhood, created websites cataloging Eucharistic miracles using his computer programming skills, died offering his suffering for the Pope and the Church. His story was impressive, certainly. A teenager who combined contemporary interests like technology and video games with profound spirituality was exactly the kind of model young Catholics needed. But Bari is far from Milan, and Carlo's influence felt distant from our southern Italian parish reality. That changed in early 2024 when something unexpected happened. Young people in our parish began discovering Carlo Acutis through social media, Instagram accounts dedicated to him, TikTok videos about his life, YouTube documentaries exploring his spirituality. Suddenly, teenagers who had shown zero interest in saints were talking about this Italian teenager who had died less than 20 years ago. Padre Alessandro, a 17-year-old named Luca, told me, "Carlo is different from other saints. He's not ancient history. He lived in my lifetime. He used computers and loved video games like I do. He wore jeans and sneakers to church, but he was also deeply holy. If he could combine being normal and being a saint, maybe I can too." By spring 2024, we had a small but growing group of young people, perhaps 20 teenagers, who were genuinely interested in Carlo's spirituality. They asked if we could organize a special celebration for the anniversary of his beatification on October 10th. They wanted to create a display about his life, have a special mass, maybe even live stream a prayer vigil so other young people could participate. I agreed, genuinely pleased to see youth engagement with the faith. We formed a planning committee, and the young people threw themselves into preparations with impressive dedication. They created a beautiful photographic exhibition about Carlo's life, set up computers displaying his Eucharistic Miracles website, and organized a 9-day novena of prayer leading up to October 12th, the anniversary of his death. But as our preparations progressed, we began encountering opposition, not from indifferent secularists who simply ignored religion, but from active, aggressive anti-religious activists who saw Carlo's growing influence among youth as a threat. In August 2024, graffiti appeared on our church's exterior wall. Carlo Acutis, Catholic propaganda for digital sheep. A week later, more graffiti. Stop brainwashing youth with fake saints. I reported the vandalism to police, who took a report but seemed unconcerned. "Father, it's just stupid kids. We'll increase patrols in the area." But it wasn't just stupid kids. In early September, I discovered an active social media campaign targeting our parish specifically. A group calling itself Rivolta Atea Italiana, Italian Atheist Revolt, had created accounts on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook dedicated to attacking Carlo Acutis and mocking young Catholics who venerated him. Their content was sophisticated and deliberately provocative. Memes portraying Carlo as a manufactured marketing saint for the Instagram generation. Videos debunking Eucharistic miracles he had catalogued. Posts accusing the Church of exploiting a dead teenager's image to recruit digitally addicted youth. The group's leader appeared to be a young man named Marco Valentini, 23 years old, a university dropout who had become radicalized into aggressive atheism after his younger brother died in a motorcycle accident at age 16. Marco's social media presence was extensive and influential, over 15,000 followers across platforms, mostly young people between 18 and 25 who were disillusioned with religion. Marco's content about Carlo Acutis was particularly vicious. This kid died because his parents probably prayed instead of getting him proper medical treatment. Now the church is turning him into a saint to sell holy cards and pilgrimages. Wake up, people. It's all a scam. In late September, the threats became more direct and specific. Our parish Facebook page received comments. Your Carlo Acutis celebration won't go as planned. Expect disruption. Anonymous emails arrived. We will expose your fake saint for the fraud he is. October 12th is coming. I contacted police again, bringing printouts of the threatening messages. The officer was more concerned this time, but still limited in what he could do. Father, we can't arrest people for online threats that don't specify violent action. We'll have extra patrols near your church during your event. But unless they actually do something criminal, our hands are tied. I considered cancelling the October 12th vigil, but the young people organizing it were adamant. Padre Alessandro, we can't let these bullies intimidate us. Carlo faced opposition during his life too. People thought he was weird for spending so much time in church. If we cancel because of threats, we're saying that aggressive atheism wins. We need to proceed with faith. Their courage shamed my own fear. All right, I agreed. We'll proceed, but we'll have security measures. Doors locked during the vigil, volunteers monitoring entrances, police on standby. October 12th, 2024, arrived with beautiful autumn weather. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, the kind of evening perfect for outdoor activities. Our vigil was scheduled for 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., a time chosen specifically to allow young people to attend after their evening commitments. By 8:45 p.m., approximately 60 people had gathered, a wonderful turnout for a weeknight evening event. The demographics were encouraging. About half were teenagers and young adults, drawn by Carlo's example. The other half were families with children and some elderly parishioners who supported the youth initiative. The church looked beautiful. Our young organizers had created a professional quality exhibition. Large photographs of Carlo from childhood through his final illness, printouts of his famous quotes, 3 computer stations showing his Eucharistic Miracles website, and a central display featuring a framed photograph of Carlo, the iconic image where he's wearing his characteristic jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers, smiling with that combination of teenage normalcy and spiritual depth. We began the vigil at 9 p.m. with songs, testimonies from young people about how Carlo's example had impacted their faith, and then transitioned into praying the rosary together. The atmosphere was devotional, but not heavy. There was joy, genuine affection for this young blessed who felt like an older brother rather than a distant saint. Around 10 p.m., I led a period of shared testimony where people could speak about graces received through Carlo's intercession. A mother testified that her son had returned to confession after years away because Carlo's story moved him. A teenage girl shared that Carlo's example helped her resist peer pressure to abandon mass attendance. An elderly man described healing from depression after praying a novena to Carlo. These testimonies were simple, heartfelt, and genuinely moving. The church felt saturated with faith, with hope, with the sense that God was truly working through this young blessed's intercession. And then, at 10:15 p.m., everything changed. The heavy wooden doors of the church, which I had specifically asked volunteers to lock from inside for security, burst open violently, the lock apparently forced. 12 young men and women stormed in, all wearing black clothing and masks covering the lower half of their faces, making them look like a scene from a dystopian film. They were carrying equipment, portable speakers already blasting distorted heavy metal music with satanic lyrics, megaphones, large handmade signs with blasphemous slogans, and several were filming with their phones, clearly intending to document their action for social media. The leader, I would later learn his name was Marco Valentini, had a megaphone and was shouting over the music. "Chega de lavagem cerebral. Wake up. Carlo Acutis is fake. Stop being sheep. The church is manipulating you." The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Children began screaming. Elderly parishioners looked panicked. Several young people immediately pulled out phones to call police. The beautiful atmosphere of prayer and devotion was shattered by chaos, noise, fear. I stood frozen at the altar for perhaps 3 seconds. That strange time dilation that occurs during crisis, when your brain is processing too much information simultaneously. Then training took over. I moved quickly toward the invaders, trying to place myself between them and the frightened congregation. "Stop! You're in a house of God. People are praying here. This is a sacred space." Marco turned toward me, and even through his mask, I could see the rage in his eyes. He turned off his megaphone briefly and spoke directly to me with cold hatred. "Padre, you're part of the problem. You're using a dead kid to manipulate these people. Tonight we're going to show everyone what a fraud your blessed really is." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when watching videos from multiple angles, I had to replay them several times to fully process the sequence of events. Marco turned away from me and walked directly toward the central display where Carlo's photograph was positioned. His intention was clear. He was going to destroy the image, probably smash it on the ground, creating a dramatic visual for their social media documentation. 2 of his companions were kicking over chairs. Another was attempting to pull down the photographic exhibition. Others were moving through the congregation with their cameras, filming frightened children and elderly people, clearly intending to show how they had disrupted Catholic brainwashing. I started moving toward Marco, trying to intercept him before he reached Carlo's image, but I was too far away. He was 3 meters from the display, then 2 meters, then 1 meter. He raised his right arm, clearly preparing to strike the framed photograph with force. And then, in the exact instant that Marco's hand began its downward arc toward the image, everything changed. A light exploded from the photograph of Carlo. Not metaphorically, not subjectively. Actual physical light, golden, brilliant, so intense that the entire church was illuminated, as if dozens of floodlights had been turned on simultaneously. The light didn't spread gradually. It appeared instantaneously, going from normal dim church lighting to blinding brilliance in a fraction of a second. Simultaneously, and I mean in the same instant, all electronic equipment the invaders were carrying stopped functioning. The portable speakers went silent mid-note. Cell phones that were recording simply turned off. The megaphone went dead. It was as if an electromagnetic pulse had targeted specifically their devices, while leaving our church lighting and the computer displays untouched. But the most impossible phenomenon, the thing that made everyone in that church gasp, scream, or freeze in shock, was what happened to the 12 invaders themselves. They became statues, not unconscious, not fallen to the ground, but frozen in whatever position they had been in at the moment the light appeared. Marco stood with his arm raised, hand positioned to strike, but completely immobile, as if he had been transformed into marble. His 2 companions, who had been kicking chairs, stood on one leg mid-kick, impossibly balanced. Another, who had been reaching to pull down a photograph, remained with arms extended, fingers touching the paper, but unable to complete the motion. All 12 stood, or in some cases balanced in physically impossible positions, completely paralyzed, with their eyes wide open, clearly conscious, clearly aware, but absolutely unable to move any part of their bodies. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word. The golden light continued emanating from Carlo's photograph, not painful to look at despite its intensity, but overwhelming in its supernatural origin. It filled every corner of the church, eliminated every shadow, created an atmosphere that felt less like a building and more like heaven. For approximately 30 seconds, no one in our congregation moved or spoke. We were as frozen by shock as the invaders were frozen by supernatural intervention. My mind was trying desperately to find rational explanations. Electrical malfunction causing the lights. Mass hallucination? Some kind of seizure affecting the invaders simultaneously? But none of those explanations could account for what I was seeing. 12 people, frozen mid-motion, some in positions that violated basic physics, balanced on one leg indefinitely, arms extended without trembling, all with their eyes open and moving, clearly conscious and aware, but completely unable to move. And then I noticed something that made my heart contract with pity. Despite these young people's violent intentions, tears were streaming down their immobile faces. They couldn't move their facial muscles, couldn't blink, couldn't speak, but tears flowed freely from their wide, terrified eyes. Whatever was happening to them wasn't just physical paralysis. Something was occurring internally, spiritually, that was causing such emotional response that even their frozen bodies couldn't prevent tears from flowing. The paralysis lasted approximately 5 minutes, though multiple witnesses later gave different time estimates ranging from a few minutes to at least 10 minutes, suggesting that subjective time perception was distorted for everyone present. During those 5 minutes, the congregation remained mostly silent, though I heard whispered prayers. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio. Jesus, protect us! What is happening? And several people were recording on their phones, creating the documentation that would later prove crucial for the church's investigation. I stood approximately 2 meters from Marco, close enough to see his eyes clearly. They were moving frantically, looking around, unable to fix on any one point. His tears continued flowing, and I saw his lips trying to move, not successfully, but making tiny micro-movements as if he were attempting to speak, but his mouth wouldn't cooperate. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the golden light began to fade. Not instantly, it dimmed gradually over perhaps 10 seconds, returning the church to its normal lighting. And as the light faded, the 12 paralyzed invaders began to move, but not in the aggressive, violent way they had been moving before. Instead, all 12, simultaneously, as if choreographed, dropped to their knees. Not fell, not stumbled, but dropped in what looked like deliberate genuflection, hitting the marble floor with their knees with audible impact that must have hurt, but which they didn't seem to notice. And then they began to sob, not quiet tears, but loud, desperate, gut-wrenching sobs. The kind of crying that comes from profound emotional breakthrough, from barriers being shattered, from encountering something so overwhelming that the only possible response is complete emotional collapse. Marco, still kneeling directly in front of Carlo's image, which had now returned to being an ordinary photograph, began shouting between sobs, "Perdonami, perdonami, Carlo, perdonami! Forgive me, Carlo, forgive me." For several minutes, chaos reigned, but a completely different kind of chaos than the violent invasion that had preceded it. The 12 young invaders remained on their knees, most sobbing uncontrollably, some calling out names. I heard Carlo, shouted multiple times. Some simply frozen in stunned silence with tears streaming down their faces. Our congregation was equally stunned. Parents were holding frightened children. Elderly parishioners were making signs of the cross repeatedly. The young people who had organized the vigil stood with expressions of absolute wonder, clearly recognizing that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. I approached Marco slowly, unsure whether he might still be dangerous despite his obvious emotional collapse. "Young man," I said quietly, "are you all right? Do you need medical assistance?" He looked up at me, and his eyes, which minutes earlier had burned with hatred, now showed something completely different. Brokenness, vulnerability, overwhelming emotion that seemed to be destroying him from inside. "Padre," he gasped between sobs. I felt him. Carlo Acutis. During those minutes when I couldn't move, he was there, inside my mind. No, not forcing, not invading, asking. He showed me. He showed me. Marco couldn't finish the sentence. He collapsed forward, his forehead touching the marble floor, his entire body shaking with sobs. I looked around at the other 11 invaders. They were exhibiting similar reactions, some crying silently, some speaking rapidly but incoherently, some simply kneeling in shock. None showed any sign of wanting to continue their attack. The violence had been completely drained from them, replaced by something that looked like spiritual devastation. "Everyone," I announced to the congregation, "please remain calm. I believe we've just witnessed divine intervention. These young people are not a threat. They're experiencing something profound. Let's give them space and time." I gestured to several of our young organizers. "Please call the police and explain that the situation is under control, but we may need assistance. Also, make sure all of this is being recorded. The church will need documentation." Over the next 2 hours, I witnessed the most dramatic mass conversion of my priesthood, possibly one of the most dramatic conversions in modern church history. As the 12 young invaders gradually regained their composure enough to speak coherently, each described experiencing virtually identical phenomena during their 5 minutes of paralysis. They had been conscious, fully aware of being unable to move, terrified by the paralysis, desperate to escape, but simultaneously experiencing interior visions or communications that felt absolutely real. Marco was the first to articulate his experience clearly enough for me to understand. "Padre, when I couldn't move, when I was frozen there with my arm raised to destroy that picture, I suddenly wasn't just in my body anymore. It's hard to explain. I could still see the church, still feel my muscles locked, still feel terror at being paralyzed. But simultaneously, I was somewhere else, or someone else was inside my consciousness. Carlo Acutis appeared. Not physically, not like I'm seeing you now, but more real than physical sight. He was wearing exactly what he's wearing in that photograph. Jeans, sneakers, that casual t-shirt. And he was smiling, not angrily or judgmentally, but with this kindness that made me want to die from shame. He spoke to me, not with words I heard with my ears, but with communication that went directly into my mind. "Marco, why are you so angry at God?" And then he showed me things, memories I had buried, forgotten, pushed away. My brother Luca's funeral. I was 17. Luca was 16, killed in a motorcycle accident. At the funeral, I blamed God, screamed at God, decided that if God existed and let Luca die, then God was either powerless or cruel, and either way, didn't deserve my faith. Carlo showed me Luca, not a memory, something different. Luca as he is now, happy, whole, alive in a way that transcends what alive meant on earth. And Luca was telling me, "Marco, I'm okay. Stop destroying yourself with rage over something that wasn't destruction. I didn't end. I transitioned." Marco was crying again, but these were different tears. Not the desperate sobs of earlier, but tears of release, of relief, of encountering truth that breaks through years of defended pain. Carlo told me, "I understand your anger, Marco. I died at 15. My parents watched me suffer from leukemia. It was horrible. But death isn't the end. It's transformation. Your rage against God is really grief for your brother. But he's not lost. He's waiting for you, and your life has purpose beyond your pain." Then Carlo said something that destroyed me. "Use your anger, Marco. You have leadership gifts, communication skills, passion. But direct them toward building, not destroying. Help other young people who've lost faith because of grief. Show them that rage is a stage, not a destination. As Marco shared his experience, other members of the group were nodding vigorously, several saying, "Si, exactly," or "That's what happened to me too." I invited them to share their experiences, and over the next 90 minutes, each of the 12 described remarkably similar encounters. Sophia, 21, a university student studying philosophy. Carlo showed me that my atheism isn't intellectual conviction, it's protection against disappointment. I stopped believing when my parents divorced, and I felt abandoned by everyone, including God. But Carlo showed me Jesus on the cross, abandoned by everyone, and said, God understands abandonment because he experienced it. He's not distant, he's intimate with your pain. Giovanni, 19, who had been kicked out of his home for his aggressive anti-religious activism. Carlo showed me that my attacks on the church are really attacks on my father, who was abusive and claimed to be a devout Catholic. But Carlo said, bad Christians don't disprove good Christ. Your father's failures don't define Jesus. Meet Jesus directly, not through your father's distortions. Alessia, 22, a graphic designer who had created most of the group's anti-Carlo memes. I thought I was sophisticated and enlightened by rejecting religion. But Carlo showed me I'm actually scared. Scared that if God is real and has plans for me, those plans might be hard. He said, faith isn't about easy life. I died at 15. Faith is about meaningful life. You're avoiding meaning because meaning requires sacrifice. Each testimony followed similar patterns. Carlo appearing during the paralysis, addressing specific wounds or fears that motivated their anti-religious stance, showing them truths about themselves they had hidden or denied, and inviting them toward healing and purpose rather than rage and destruction. By midnight, 2 hours after the invasion, all 12 young people had given their testimonies. The progression was remarkable. They had entered as enemies intending to mock and destroy, experienced 5 minutes of paralysis with mystical encounters, and emerged as broken but open seekers, asking how to rebuild the faith they had spent years attacking. Marco approached me with humble directness. Padre Alessandro, I came here tonight to destroy an image and disrupt your worship. Instead, God destroyed my defenses and disrupted my entire worldview. What do I do now? Where do I start? I looked at this young man, who 2 hours earlier had been shouting blasphemies through a megaphone and attempting to smash a sacred image, now kneeling before me with genuine contrition and desperate seeking, and I felt overwhelming pastoral tenderness. Marco, the first step is the sacrament of reconciliation, confession. You and your companions have done serious wrong: vandalism, disruption of worship, assault on sacred space. But God's mercy exceeds all sin. If your repentance is genuine, and I believe it is, then confession begins your path toward healing. All of us, Marco gestured to his 11 companions, we all want confession. Tonight, now. We can't leave this church still carrying the weight of what we've done. I had not heard individual confessions in years. Most sacramental reconciliation in our parish occurs during scheduled confession times, not spontaneous requests. But this was clearly an extraordinary situation requiring pastoral flexibility. I will hear all of your confessions. It will take time, probably 2 hours, and then we'll need to address the practical consequences. You've damaged church property, you've traumatized people, you'll need to make restitution. But first, let's address your souls. From midnight until approximately 2:30 a.m., I heard 12 of the most emotionally intense confessions of my priestly life. Each young person confessed not just the evening's invasion, but years of accumulated sins, wounds, and rebellion. Many wept throughout their confessions. All expressed genuine contrition and desire for transformation. When I finally gave the 12th absolution and emerged from the confessional exhausted but profoundly moved, I found that most of our original vigil participants had remained, praying quietly in the pews, waiting to see what would happen with these young people who had invaded with violence and were now leaving with grace. I gathered everyone, our congregation and the 12 converted invaders, in front of the altar. My dear friends, tonight we have witnessed something extraordinary. What began as attack became encounter. What seemed like disaster became divine intervention. 12 young people who came to mock have become 12 witnesses to Carlo Acutis's continued intercessory power. I turned to Marco and his companions. You will need to face consequences for your actions. You've damaged property, frightened people, committed crimes, but you've also experienced God's mercy in dramatic form. The Church embraces you. This community embraces you. Carlo Acutis, whose image you came to destroy, has become your advocate and defender. Marco spoke for the group. Padre, and everyone here, we are profoundly sorry for the fear and harm we caused. We will make full restitution, repair what we damaged, apologize publicly, accept whatever legal consequences follow. But we also need your help. We've spent years building identities around anti-religious rage. Now those identities are shattered. We need to learn how to live as believers after years of living as attackers. One of the elderly women who had been terrified during the invasion stood up. Signora Elena, a daily mass attendee who had been weeping with fear when the young people first burst in. She approached Marco directly. Young man, you frightened me terribly tonight. I thought you might hurt us, might hurt the children, but I've watched what happened to you. I've heard your confession of faith, and I want you to know, you are forgiven. We forgive you, and we will help you. She embraced Marco, who began crying again. And then something beautiful happened. Other members of our congregation began approaching the 12 young people, embracing them, welcoming them, offering phone numbers and promises of support. The invasion had become an adoption. The enemies had become family. The immediate aftermath of October 12, 2024 was chaotic in practical ways, but profoundly moving in spiritual ways. The police arrived around 1 a.m. They had been delayed by other calls and were completely baffled by what they found. 12 young people who had committed clear crimes, forced entry, vandalism, disruption of worship, but who were now kneeling in prayer with the very people they had attacked, having apparently undergone complete conversions. The police took statements from me and from several witnesses. They viewed some of the video footage captured during the invasion, and they were confronted with something law enforcement procedures don't easily accommodate. Perpetrators who freely confess their crimes, accept full responsibility, and show genuine transformation that makes conventional prosecution seem almost beside the point. Eventually, after consulting with their superiors, the police decided on a middle path. The 12 young people would be charged with misdemeanors, not felonies, required to make financial restitution for damages, perform community service, and attend mandatory counseling. But given their obvious transformation and the parish's willingness to advocate for them, they would avoid jail time if they complied with all conditions. Marco and his companions agreed immediately to all terms. The bigger challenge was what to do with the documentation. By the morning of October 13th, multiple videos of the invasion and its extraordinary conclusion were circulating on social media. The same platforms where Marco had spread anti-Carlo content were now showing dramatic footage of the violent invasion itself. The explosion of golden light from Carlo's photograph, the instantaneous paralysis of all 12 invaders, their synchronized dropping to knees as the light faded, their tearful testimonies about mystical encounters with Carlo Acutis. Within 48 hours, the videos had been viewed over 5 million times. News outlets began calling for interviews. Catholic websites published articles. Miracle at Bari. Anti-religious activists converted by supernatural light. Skeptics analyzed the footage looking for evidence of fraud or special effects. The Archdiocese of Bari quickly took control of the narrative, issuing a careful statement. We are aware of the extraordinary events of October 12th at the Church of San Francesco. The Archdiocese is collecting testimony and documentation. We ask for patience as we discern what occurred and whether it constitutes authentic supernatural intervention requiring referral to the congregation for the causes of saints. Within a week, investigators from Rome arrived. Clergy, theologians, and medical professionals tasked with examining the event according to the Church's rigorous protocols for evaluating supernatural claims. The investigation lasted 3 months and was remarkably thorough. Investigators interviewed all witnesses present during the invasion. This included our 60 original vigil participants, the 12 invaders, and me. Each person provided detailed written and oral testimony describing what they saw, heard, and experienced. The consistency of independent accounts was striking. Analyzed video footage frame by frame. Multiple cell phone recordings from different angles provided comprehensive documentation. Technology experts examined the footage for evidence of manipulation, digital editing, or special effects. Their conclusion? The videos show genuine phenomena with no indication of fraud or technical manipulation. Investigated the paralysis phenomenon medically. Neurologists and physicians interviewed the 12 young people who experienced paralysis, conducting physical examinations and reviewing their medical histories. Their findings were remarkable. None of the 12 had any medical condition that could explain simultaneous paralysis followed by instant recovery. The positions some had held, balanced on one leg, arms extended without trembling, were physiologically impossible to maintain through natural muscular control for 5 minutes. Evaluated the electromagnetic effect on electronic devices. The simultaneous failure of all electronic equipment the invaders carried, while church systems remained functional, suggested localized electromagnetic disruption. But electronics specialists found no evidence of any EMP device or technology that could have caused this effect. Moreover, the invaders' devices, when examined afterward, showed no permanent damage typical of electromagnetic pulses. They simply stopped working temporarily. Interviewed the 12 converted young people extensively about their mystical experiences. Psychologists spent hours with each person, examining their mental health, exploring possible explanations for their visions, hallucination, suggestion, psychological projection, and assessing the authenticity of their conversions. The conclusion was that all 12 appeared psychologically healthy. Their experiences didn't fit profiles of hallucination or delusion, and their conversions appeared genuine and sustained. In January 2025, 3 months after the event, the Archdiocese of Bari issued its preliminary conclusion. Based on extensive investigation, we find no natural explanation for the phenomena of October 12, 2024. The simultaneous paralysis of 12 individuals, the golden light emanating from a photograph, the immediate and sustained conversions, and the consistency of mystical experiences described independently by multiple individuals suggest authentic supernatural intervention. We are referring this case to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints for further examination as a potential miracle attributable to the intercession of Blessed Carlo Acutis. The Vatican accepted the referral and launched its own investigation, which is ongoing as I write this testimony. But beyond the official investigations and ecclesial processes, the most significant aftermath has been the transformations in the lives of the 12 converted young people and in our parish community. Marco Valentini, who led the invasion and who would later describe that night as the death of my false self and the birth of my true self, underwent a complete life transformation. He closed down all his anti-religious social media accounts and created new ones dedicated to sharing his conversion story. His authentic, non-preachy testimony resonated powerfully with young skeptics. I'm not going to tell you that believing in God solves all your problems. I still struggle. I still have doubts. But what happened to me on October 12th was undeniably real. I experienced something that can't be explained through psychology or group suggestion. Carlo Acutis intervened in my life when I was trying to destroy his image. He showed me mercy when I deserved judgment. That changed everything. Within weeks, Marco had attracted over 50,000 followers, many of them young skeptics like he had been, drawn by his honesty about the difficulty of faith while also being unable to dismiss his testimony of dramatic supernatural encounter. In February 2025, Marco approached me with a proposal. Padre Alessandro, I want to become a catechist. Specifically, I want to work with young people who are angry at God, who've left the church, who think faith is for weak or stupid people. I've been there. I understand that mentality from inside. Let me help reach them. I appointed him as our parish's first missionary to skeptics. A catechist specifically focused on young people with doubts, anger, or active hostility toward faith. His approach is completely different from traditional catechesis. He starts by validating their doubts, acknowledging the church's failures, admitting his own ongoing struggles. And then he shares his story, the invasion, the paralysis, the encounter with Carlo, with such unvarnished honesty that even the most skeptical young people listen. The other 11 converted invaders have undergone similar transformations. Sophia, the philosophy student, returned to university but changed her focus from abstract atheistic philosophy to the intersection of faith and reason. She's writing her thesis on modern atheism as trauma response, examining how personal suffering creates intellectual barriers to belief. Giovanni, who had been kicked out of his home, reconciled with his father after months of difficult conversations. They attended family therapy together, working through the religious hypocrisy that had driven Giovanni's rebellion. Last month, Giovanni entered seminary, not because of family pressure, but from genuine calling that emerged after his conversion. Alessia, the graphic designer, now uses her skills creating materials for the church, exactly the opposite of the anti-Carlo memes she had created before. She's designed a series of Saints for Skeptics, featuring young saints like Carlo presented in contemporary visual style that appeals to her generation. 3 other members of the original 12 have also entered religious life or seminary. The remaining 6 are actively involved in parish ministry, youth evangelization, or charitable work. The conversion rate, 12 out of 12, is itself remarkable. Conversions that occur during dramatic moments sometimes fade when emotions cool and normal life resumes. But 18 months after the invasion, all 12 maintain their faith, attend Mass regularly, participate in sacraments, and actively serve the Church. Our parish itself has been transformed by the events of October 12th. We've become something of a pilgrimage site. Young people especially come from across Italy and beyond to see the church where the miracle of Bari occurred, to pray before the photograph of Carlo that was the focal point of the supernatural light, and to hear the testimony of those who experienced conversion. Our regular Sunday Mass attendance has tripled. Our youth ministry has grown from about 20 teenagers to over 150. We've had to add additional confession times because so many young people are returning to the sacrament, many citing the example of Marco and his companions, who showed that even those far from faith can encounter God's mercy. Most significantly, there's been a revival of devotion to Carlo Acutis specifically. Before October 2024, Carlo was known primarily to a niche audience of young Catholics interested in technology and Eucharistic devotion. But after the Bari event, his intercession is being sought by thousands of skeptical young people, many of whom pray. Carlo, you converted violent enemies through one dramatic encounter. Please help me in my quieter struggles with faith. Show me that God is real. And many report receiving answers, not necessarily dramatic paralysis and mystical visions, but interior movements toward faith, unexpected encounters with believers who address specific doubts, and gradual opening of hearts that had been closed. For me personally, the events of October 12, 2024, have transformed my priesthood in ways I'm still discovering. For 28 years, I was a competent but unexceptional pastor, dutiful, faithful, but not particularly inspired or inspiring. I managed parish affairs efficiently. I celebrated sacraments correctly. I preached adequately. But I had no personal experience of the kind of dramatic divine intervention that saints and mystics describe. October 12th changed that forever. I stood 2 meters from a photograph that exploded with supernatural light. I watched 12 young people freeze into immobility that violated physical laws. I heard their identical testimonies of mystical encounter with Carlo Acutis. I witnessed conversions so dramatic and sustained that they defy psychological explanation. I can no longer doubt that the supernatural realm is as real, more real, than the natural realm I navigate daily. I can no longer preach about miracles as historical events that occurred in the past. I now preach about miracles as present realities that God continues to work through the intercession of saints like Carlo Acutis. My homilies have changed. My pastoral approach has changed. My prayer life has changed. I now begin each day asking, what impossible thing might God do today? How can I cooperate with divine intervention rather than assuming everything operates through natural causation? Last week, Marco stopped by my office. He's now 24 years old, has been working as our parish's missionary to skeptics for over a year, and has helped dozens of young people overcome hostility toward faith through his authentic testimony. Padre Alessandro, do you remember what I was going to do that night? I was going to smash Carlo's image, destroy it, film it for social media to mock faith. I remember. But Carlo didn't let me. He stopped me physically, that paralysis, and then converted me spiritually through the encounter during those 5 minutes. And now, instead of destroying his image, I'm spreading his image. Instead of mocking his intercession, I'm testifying to it, the exact opposite of what I intended. Marco smiled. That same smile I had seen on his face many times since his conversion, the smile of someone who has experienced mercy beyond deserving and can't quite believe the grace he's received. Padre, that's how God works, isn't it? He takes our worst intentions and our most violent attacks, and he transforms them into his purposes. I came as an enemy. Carlo made me a missionary. That's the gospel in one story. Yes, Marco, that's exactly the gospel. And that's exactly what Carlo Acutis continues to do from heaven, meeting people in their rebellion, their rage, their attacks on faith, and transforming them into witnesses. Your living proof. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word. My name is Father Alessandro Costa. I am 52 years old. I have been a priest for 28 years and have served as parish priest of the Church of San Francesco in Bari for 28 years. On the night of October 12th, 2024, exactly 18 years after the death of Carlo Acutis, who was born May 3rd, 1991, died October 12, 2006, and was beatified October 10th, 2020, I witnessed supernatural intervention that defied all natural explanation. 12 young anti-religious activists invaded our church violently, intending to disrupt worship and destroy an image of Carlo Acutis. Instead, a golden light exploded from that image. All their electronic equipment simultaneously failed, and they were paralyzed for 5 minutes, during which Carlo Acutis appeared to each of them individually, addressed their personal wounds, and invited them toward healing and faith. All 12 experienced immediate, dramatic, sustained conversions. The invasion became adoption. The enemies became family. The attackers became missionaries. The event was documented on multiple videos from different angles. It has been investigated by church authorities, medical professionals, and technology experts. No natural explanation has been found. This is my testimony. This is what I witnessed. This is the proof that Carlo Acutis, a teenager who died at 15 wearing Nike sneakers, continues from heaven to exercise intercessory power so dramatic that even the most hostile hearts cannot resist when he chooses to intervene. The saints do not sleep. They do not passively wait for final resurrection. They are active, present, and powerful. And Carlo Acutis is showing my generation that holiness is not ancient history or medieval mysticism. It is contemporary reality operating with the power to transform even violent enemies into passionate disciples. This is the miracle of Bari, and it continues to bear fruit every day in the transformed lives of 12 young people who came to destroy and stayed to worship.